week 4 of the weekly session. Today we're looking at an out of possession topic which is focusing on timing intercepting passes. I ran this session with 12 players and had access to half of a 7v7 pitch. Equipment needed included cones, bibs, balls, goals and flat discs in order to be able to mark out thirds for the final game. The objectives of the session were for players to understand what triggers would encourage them to go and press, what triggers would encourage them to try and intercept the ball, and also how to make recovery runs in case the interception doesn't quite work out the way that you want it to. Some of the key words that we discussed at the start of the session was pressing, intercepting, and in particular, triggers. It's a word that gets used a lot in coaching circles, but sometimes I'm not too sure if young kids know what it means. So we discussed what I meant by a trigger. The example I gave was that if they could imagine a gun going off in their head whenever they see something and they have to act, it's like somebody's pulling the trigger. And using imagery like this can really help players understand footballing terms. Upon arrival, we went straight into a game of slam, aka wall ball, for those who are from a different area of England to me. If you don't know what it is, I'm fortunate enough to have access to a wall at the practice facility where I am. The whole pitch is surrounded by one, and players take it in turns to take one touch to hit the ball against a certain part of the wall. Now they have to take their turns in the order that they set. If the ball hits them when it's not their turn, they get a letter. If they kick the ball and miss the wall, or they have more than one touch, they also get a letter. Because the game is called slam, obviously the letter would then be S. If they make another mistake, then they get L. And what they're trying not to do is to spell out the word slam, S-L-A-M. So ultimately, they have 4 lives. If you do have access to a wall, it's quite big. You can put a restriction on how high the kids can kick the ball in order to help them focus on getting their head over the ball when they strike a one-touch shot. It gets them thinking about how to anticipate where someone's going to kick the ball. It gets the player striking the ball to think about using their body shape to get the person next moving one way so they can kick it another and really try and stitch them up in that sense. It's also a fun game that the kids enjoy, because who doesn't enjoy kicking a football really hard against a wall? After all the players had arrived, we went into a game of mirrors. Players chose groups of 3, with 2 players doing the work and 1 person making the commands. The player on the outside would call out 3 colours from the 5 cones that they had to choose from. For example, blue, yellow, red. The 2 players would then have to race to these cones in that order, with the first person getting to the cone to be the winner. They would rotate every turn, so that players would work for 2 and then rest for 1. And there was a few purposes to this practice. Number 1, it was for conditioning purposes. Young players are still learning how to use their body. So I want to provide that stimulus to encourage players to change direction quickly and at speed, and have to use that explosive nature when changing direction. Secondly, following on from last week's sliding and screening practice, if they do have to slide across and screen a pass, then that side-to-side movement is getting worked now. Their legs are getting used to it, plus they're also getting used to having to move across quickly as well as slowly. It's a really fun game for young kids to play. There was a lot of smiles. They get to cover that social element of their development as well, having a laugh with their mates, building that team bond. And there's a bit of competition involved, so once again we're forcing that competitive element and that will to win in the players, even though they're not taking the results too seriously. To progress the session, you can give both players a ball. Once again, they've got something else to think about now. Young players under 9s, we know the importance of allowing them to have game realistic touches, and this encourages them to think about when to dribble, when to run with the ball, when and how to turn. Are they keeping the ball close enough so they can turn quickly? How are they getting the ball out of their feet so they can accelerate away from the cone as quickly as possible? And if you want to progress it even further, then you can have 1 player with a ball and 1 player without. So it's almost like the player with the ball is trying to lose the opponent, and the opponent is trying to keep up with them by blocking their route to goal. Once again, similar to what we're looking at today, they might have to move side to side to screen that pass forward or that route forward from a defensive point of view. The next practice was a 3 versus 3 style game. It was 3 versus 2 plus a goalkeeper. So one team had 2 outfield players and a goalkeeper with a big goal to defend, and the other team had 3 players with a small goal to defend. I started it off with a constraint involved where the pitch was split in half, and teams always had to make sure they had at least 1 outfield player on each half. But after about 5 minutes, it was quite messy. The players weren't quite getting it, and I decided to take that role out. And as a result, it actually opened up quite a few more of the outcomes I was hoping to see just by playing a regular 3 versus 2 plus goalkeeper. So questions I asked the players in this game included: how can we catch the opponent out? What type of things are they doing to tell us to go and press or intercept the pass? Answers they gave were: they're not looking at me, the pass was a little bit weak, the pass is closer to me than it is the opponent, All really good answers that then I could build on in terms of, yes, so when you see this thing, this is what we want to be able to do. But of course, that ultimately comes from players giving me the feedback in terms of what they're seeing, and then I can embellish their answers so they have a clear understanding of what we're asking for from the session. In order to give everyone a chance as the team with the underload and the team with the overload, we switched things round halfway through. So both sets of players got to be 3 outfield players as well as 2 outfield players with a goalkeeper. The final part of the practice was a 6v6 game. I split the pitch into thirds, and the constraint on the game was that teams always had to have at least 1 outfield player in each third. Part of the reason for this is that one of the things I've noticed in recent tournaments, we had 2 tournaments in 2 weekends where we played 13 games, is we've still got some players who are very keen to chase the ball. So I want to give them almost that guided discovery type stimulus to allow them to see the benefits of actually standing a little bit more spaced out and keeping the spaces on the pitch that we want to cover a little bit more so than positioning. You know, I want to give the players a little bit of freedom to move and rotate, but of course there's certain spaces that we want to cover to allow ourselves to play the best we can. Because the pitch was stretched lengthways, I was hoping it was going to force or encourage some longer forward passes, which would then of course give players the opportunity to decide whether to step in and intercept, whether to press, whether to delay, and also if they do miss that interception, then having to run back and recover. I added an additional constraint to this where I said if they can win the ball back and score within 6 seconds, then the goal would be worth 3. I wanted to try and encourage them pressing the ball quite high, in the attack in the opponent's defensive third, to try and intercept the pass there, or at least press and force a mistake, because that's part of my ideal way, my ideal game model. I want to see teams go and quite attack the ball, but without really forcing it. It was more, this is the constraint. Let's see how you guys go about interpreting that. And it made for a really good game. There was a lot of good attacking play, but also a lot of good defensive play as well. Players stepping in, players covering the goal, players pressing, players intercepting passes and starting attacks. It turned out to be a really good way of finalising the intercepting passes module that we've been looking at for the last 4 weeks with the players. If you've enjoyed the video, then make sure you follow for week 5. It's going to be coming in a few days' time. And also give us a thumbs up if you choose to use this with your players.